Hello and welcome to the Story Behind the Stories, your weekly look at the pages of the Neepawa Banner Press. Thank you very much for taking a little bit of your time and spending it here with us on NAC TV. I'm Eoin Devereux with the Banner Press, joined this week by publisher of the Banner Press, Ken Waddell. Ken, good to have you in this week to sort of review the week that was.
Thank you. Good to be here.
All right, and what a week it was. We're going to start off with a little bit of positivity. To a degree, there is positivity coming from negativity in a sense on this. And that comes from Casper Warehan's front page story this week of The Warmth of Giving. And it's the Neepawa Newcomers Coat Room. It's a story we've talked about in several previous editions of the Banner Press. If you've been out and about, maybe not today, but when we're recording it, but the last couple days, you'll probably notice the wind's gotten a little bit chillier, a touch nippier. That indicates that we are slowly starting to shift over into fall weather. And of course, followed quickly by fall is going to be the winter. And with a lot of new arrivals in Neepawa, they are not prepared. We try and prepare them as best we can, but they are not prepared for a Canadian winter. That's where Neepawa Newcomers Coat Room comes into play. They donate and they gather up and they're able to purchase quality winter coats for families who are arriving in Canada, arriving in Neepawa, and might not be prepared to the degree that they need to be in the middle of January. And I think it's a great program. As I said, Ken, it's something we've talked about in this newspaper and on this station many times over the years. And it's wonderful to see that they're still moving as they are.
Yeah, this program kind of was a different name was around a few years ago. Coats for Kids used to be called, and it's morphed into this over the years. Purchased coats, yes, but donations too. Lots of donations, and it's just a great thing. And as Eoin says, people come from a much warmer climate than Neepawa, at least much warmer than we are in the wintertime. And it's quite a shock when they hit those December and January days. The wind blowing down Mountain Avenue just about takes you out if you're not used to it. So this will help get the kids warmed up for walking to school and some for adults as well. So it's an excellent program. Credit to Liesl Milligan and her committee for putting this together. And yeah, I think they're probably going to get lots of customers.
Yep, and again, it is for newcomers, and the sad part about it as well is also for those that maybe don't have the availability or the funding to be able to do something like that. It supports those that are maybe falling in between the cracks as well. So it's nice to see that wide a swath of coverage for people in our community. So if you want to hear a little bit of a good news story, that's the one you want to start out with. It's on page 1 of this week's edition of the Banner Press. Continues on to page number 9 of this week's paper. So hopefully you will take a moment. Because once you get into the paper, there's a few good news, there's a few bad news, and we're going to get into this bad news one. We cannot take full credit on this. This was a breaking story that came out of the Winnipeg Free Press earlier this week. It's a story that has been covered by the press many decades ago, though, and the Free Press as well many decades ago, that is unfortunately once again sort of reared its unfortunate and ugly head. Beautiful Plains School Division is facing a lawsuit from a former student in the 80s of it in relation to an individual who allegedly, and again, for those sensitive, we're not usually going to sort of sugarcoat these things here. They were abused by the counselor. They are alleging they were abused by the counselor. We don't know the name of the individual. We don't need to get into those details. But they are saying that this individual did such a thing. And Ken, you've got a lot more details on that, a lot more information that you were able to shed some light in the story as well.
Well, I remember the incident very well. I don't remember I remember hearing of the incidents very well in the mid-'80s, and actually our boys were in school, and it was some of their classmates and contemporaries who allegedly were assaulted by this man, and Dr. Richard Tomei. And it's in the article, it's in the Free Press article, and it's a matter of court record that he was found guilty not only in Manitoba, but previously, I believe, in Alberta, of assaults, and he just kind of disappeared.
And British Columbia.
Right.
And this, again, Ken, was a groundbreaking revelation for Manitoba. This incident, these incidents which occurred, changed the entire subtext of how the school divisions, not just here in Beautiful Plains, but in every aspect of Manitoba, and perhaps even many other provinces, do background checks and criminal background checks on the people they're going to hire. Because back in the day, back in the 80s, these types of things were not they were not the mandate in any way, shape, or form, were they?
No, it's explained in an article in the Winnipeg Free Press that the school superintendent of the day didn't do a criminal record check because it wasn't a thing back then. In fact, it's inferred in the story that it may have not been even legal to do a criminal record check, but by today's standards that seems preposterous, but because you have to have a criminal record check to do just about anything nowadays, especially if it involves people under the age of 18. But it was a nasty bit of business. It went away. Heard very little bit about it afterwards, but there is an alleged victim who is coming forward and saying that they suffer irreparable damage.
And again, we are very specific when we use the term alleged. We're not trying to use the term in order to be flippant. We use the term because we don't know at this point in time. There were 4 victims that were confirmed back in the 80s that occurred. This incident occurred over in Carberry, and there were 4 victims that were confirmed on it. Their names were never released to the public. We don't know whether this individual is one of those 4 that were part of the initial court case, or whether this is a new individual who has come forward now at this time. And it's one of those types of topics where you have to be respectful, but also at the same time you have to tell the truth on this as best you can. And this is the truth we have as best we know it right now. We are very appreciative, and we fully acknowledge that a lot of the lifting on this was done through the Winnipeg Free Press earlier this week. So if you want to find even more specific details, I'm going to give you this information. It's not something I usually do. Usually I don't give a shout out to the other organizations, but to Kevin Rollison in the August 27th article in the August 27th edition of the Winnipeg Free Press. You can get more information. You can find further details. We fully accredit Kevin and the Free Press in terms of this. We felt it was important enough that we had to share this story in any way, shape, or form we could. We don't have the same resources, the same manpower, the same time and materials that a big organization such as the Winnipeg Free Press has. But we do what we can, and we're able to bring, through Ken's narrative in the addition to this story, a more local perspective. So hopefully you'll be able to take a little bit of both from both of these aspects.
And it's hoped that it comes to resolution. The individual is not suing the alleged defendant; he's suing the school division.
Because we honestly don't even know if the defendant is still alive.
Yeah, I have no idea. I've tried to track it down just for interest purposes a few times over the years, because we personally knew this man. My wife and I knew him. Not well, but he was in the school system. We knew him as a child psychologist or a school psychologist, and it was just a very unfortunate situation all the way around. And I think, I know that there was certainly damage done to some of the students. I vouch for that.
And the thing is, when you have something like this occurring in the year 2024, from incidents that occurred between 1982 and 84, in and around that time, the individuals that were involved, the administration and the management and the board that were involved with Beautiful Plains School Division, they're not part of Beautiful Plains School Division anymore. All the people who are involved with it now were children themselves, for the most part, or young people when these incidences were occurring. So we don't want you to think that in any way, shape, or form this is sort of an effort to discourage or discredit those working so hard right now for Beautiful Plains School Division. You have to be able to address the news that occurs, both good and bad, even in a small town. And this is something that is occurring. This is news. So we have to report that straight down the middle. But again, don't think that in any way, shape, or form this is an attempt to besmirch the current regime at the Beautiful Plains School Division. But the reality is the organization as a whole was a part of this 40 years ago.
40 years ago. Yeah.
40 years ago. So
Yeah.
the individual feels that somewhere along the line someone needs to answer for it. So
Yeah, and the person who's bringing forth the lawsuit will be in their 50s now, and this Dr. Tomei, will be probably at least 70 if he's still alive. But the Free Press wasn't able to find him, and neither was I.
yeah. This is a story most likely will be developing over the next few months. If there is any new information that comes about, we will try and share it with you as best we can. We know these types of things are of a sensitive nature, but we try and share the information as possible. Yeah. We prefer sharing more uplifting information, more positive for the community information, and these following stories, I feel to a degree, are a little better example of that. This one is a good example of it. Hopefully will be even more so a little later on, and I'll explain that in a moment. If you live in Neepawa, over the last couple of weeks, you saw a lot of dirt and a lot of ground and a lot of parking wasn't as good as it normally is on Hamilton or portions of Mountain. That's because some new street lights were being put in. They were being put in by Manitoba Hydro. In total, there were about a dozen LED lights that were positioned in there, much larger lights. If you remember the old ones, and there's still a few on the street a little further down. You can compare. The height of them is just like, it's unbelievable, the change. But these new LEDs are much more energy efficient. They are much better in terms of flooding a larger scope of area with some light. And Manitoba Hydro, I had a chance to speak with representatives on there. They explained some of the details behind them, the reasoning for it. They were replacing lights that were actually in there since about 1985. So they were I'd imagine, Ken, well past due to get an upgrade.
Well, I'm older than that, and I'm not past due yet, Owen, I don't think. And I'm older than 40. Left you speechless, eh? This is a very enlightening topic, too, by the way.
I'm not saying a word. I'm not saying a single word. Tunnel vision on the story. No, Ken,
But they're not on yet,
No.
Owen. They're not on yet. They got great coils of wire hanging on the post.
Yeah.
They're down here, and the lights are up there,
Yeah.
and they haven't got them hooked up yet.
That's the thing here as well, is what's kind of interesting and what might end up being a follow-up story in a future edition of the Banner Press is, as Ken had shared with you, those lights aren't actually up and operating yet. I was driving downtown a few minutes after 9 p.m. the other night. I noticed that sections of Mountain, pretty much right in front of our building, were a lot darker than usual. And as well, Hamilton was a little bit darker than usual. And I thought, well, wait, these lights are on. How come the new lights are on? Well, because for the most part, it seems like they're not operational yet because the cables aren't fully installed and functional yet. So I'm going to give them, just between you and me, I'm going to give them a few more days to get their stuff together.
Yeah.
Sometimes, long weekend, you decide, I could do that job today, but I'll leave it till Tuesday. I'll leave it till then. I want to enjoy my long weekend. So I'm going to give Hydro the benefit of the doubt that they want to enjoy their long weekend. But come next Tuesday, come next Wednesday, if those lights still aren't operational, come Thursday or Friday, I might have to be sending another email to Hydro going, hey guys, these things are pretty, but are they just ornamental or do they actually function? So this could be a story that even goes further along the lines. They look really pretty. Physically they're great, but, I guess we'll find out soon whether they actually do what they say they're supposed to do, right, Ken?
We could have a pool. We can see which is going to be up first, the Christmas lights or the street lights.
I'm giving odds on the Christmas lights. But I would love to be proven wrong on that.
Yeah.
So if you want to find that story, it is also on page 2 of this week's edition of the Neepawa Banner Press. Always remember, you can find the Banner Press in 30 different locations, 30 different communities throughout Western Manitoba. So find it at your convenience. And if you're not able to, if you watch the show on a consistent basis, but you're not from Western Manitoba, it always goes live on our website, mywestman.ca, every Friday morning at around 9 a.m. Central Time. So if you can't get a physical copy, mywestman.ca. All right, let's go over to some of the council do's and don'ts and here-do-wells, as it were. In July and August, they always hold just one council meeting, and they recently held it, and they had a lot of sort of paperwork and sort of just little basic details. I've got a full story aside from the one we're going to talk about in a few minutes on that same page. It might interest you, it might not. It's council. So take that with a grain of salt, but there is a lot of pertinent information that you'll be able to get from it, and it's on page 8 of this week's edition. On top of that page is our feature story, which came out of council. This one I think you need to most definitely take a few minutes and pay attention to, because this one could have very significant long-term ramifications for not just Neepawa, but our surrounding area. Representatives with Handy Van and Handy Van Transit spoke to Neepawa Council. I most likely assume they're going to be doing this to other RMs throughout the area as well. It was John Pottinger and Ray Drayson from the Neepawan Area Disabled Persons Association. They made a very sobering declaration at the council meeting. Handy Van, and I'm going to quote here from John here, quote, "Our bank balance currently is $28,650 in the hole."
Ooh, ouch.
Government on an annual basis, and when I say government, I talk about the province of Manitoba, annually funds Handy Van $30,000 to help with their operations. There are also assistance that comes through from the town of Neepawa and several local RMs which participate in it. They are very thankful for that support. It is very necessary to keep things running. But as you've probably noticed over the last 3 or 4 years, because I've noticed over the last 3 or 4 years, and Ken's probably noticed definitely over the last 3 or 4 years, everything has gotten a lot more expensive. One of those big deals that's gotten a lot more expensive is fuel. And a transit vehicle needs a lot of fuel. And vehicles have gotten so much more expensive. Handy Transit, they have 3 vehicles, and their newest one just had $7,000 worth of work done to it. Their older van is from 2014, 10 years old, and the bus that they use is even older than that. It's so old they're not even quite sure what year it is. They think somewhere between 2006 and 2010. They're not 100% sure. They are running into financial strife right now that could be the end of Handy Transit. Let's not mince words here. Let's not sugarcoat it. This could be the end. So they went to council and they said, look, this is the reality. We're going to need some more assistance most likely in the future, or we're not going to be able to continue to operate. That is a very unfortunate thing to be hearing from an organization that does so much, Ken.
Yeah. And it's all around. Like, the city of Brandon's having a terrible time keeping their transit buses going. I think they have about 17 or 18, and they said they rarely have more than 10 on the road.
Yep.
The rest are in the garage. Now they've got a better record than that with the Handy Van because they're able to keep them running, but it's costly. But the fuel and everything else, and the ridership is down. And maybe it's a little too expensive for people. Maybe they're not using it as often, but they've noted in the article that the ridership is down. So it can't keep going. It just can't keep going the way it is, and unless the province decides to step up with a subsidy for it. But I hate to see that happen too. But I hate to see the service go. So it would leave a lot of people really in a tough spot.
You bring up a valid point on there, talking about some of those things and the province's commitment as well. John made this comment, and you can find it in the paper. I'm going to paraphrase it a little bit. He's been a member of the board for Handy Transit for several years. His father was a member as well for almost 2 decades, if I remember off the top of my head here. And the amount of money, for the most part, the amount of funding that they received when his father was on the board, when his father was in the beginning stages of being on the board, for the most part, it's still the same as it was then. It's still the same right now. Everything else has gotten more expensive. Everything else has gotten more pricey. Everything else, the number has gone incrementally up year over year, except for the provincial funding to programs like Handy Transit. And there's enough blame to go around on this. Don't get me wrong. In those numbers, there's enough blame for the NDP, there's enough blame for the Progressive Conservatives, and there's enough blame for the NDP again. All right, we've come full circle. So everybody, whether you wear an orange tie or whether you wear a blue tie, you get equal blame on this. You know, so the province most definitely needs to step up in some way, shape, or form, Ken. And again, unfortunately, towns like Neepawa and RM, local RMs, got to do it as well.
Yeah, the thing that...
But again, I'm sorry, I'll cut you off real quick. But again, I'm not throwing them under the bus. They do the best they can with the resources they have. They don't have the same coffers as the province of Manitoba. Province of Manitoba could make this go away like that, solve the problem like that. But for some reason or another, you know, you got to go through 3 different committees and 4 different, boards before you even get an answer of yes or no. We'll look at the question, let alone solve it.
There's another aspect of it too, is that if I remember correctly, and ironically, our Lions Club has announced last week that they're shutting down here in Neepawa, and we have the history. I think it's in this week's paper of the club. They were huge in supplying the money for the first van, or first maybe more than one van, and I'm pretty sure it was a Lions handy van at one time before it got taken over by the town intertown and municipal committee. But it's that money hasn't come back, and I think the idea originally was that they would buy the first one and hopefully it would be self-supporting after that. But without government funding and grants and different donations and whatever, it would not have kept going as long as it has.
Now you're probably asking yourselves a few questions here about, well, why don't they do this? Why don't they do that? Most likely the same questions you're asking yourself right now, council members for the town of Neepawa asked as well. They said, well, what about raising the price? And they said many of the people that use it are on fixed incomes. So a large incremental increase would be too impactful for their daily, monthly budgets. But it is something they are considering. But they have to be very careful about that. It's a very ebb and flow sort of balance that you've got to keep between your ridership and what they can afford to pay. Another thing they talked about is, what about sponsorships? There are large corporations, I'm sure, that would be more than willing to do sponsorships or anything along those lines. And they were told, well, no, as soon as you do something like that, the money from the province is done. They don't give you dime one. And they cannot guarantee that sponsorships will surpass the $30,000 that is given each and every year. So it's a dangerous game they have to play. They could do it, but if it comes in, they get $25,000 worth of sponsorship, they've lost money on that equation. So they are handcuffed in a lot of ways, unfortunately.
Got to have a solution. I don't think the community wants to be without it.
No, most definitely. This, if you're going to take a few minutes, this is a story I think you need to read, you need to inform yourself about. Even if you don't use it in any way, shape, or form, I'm sure you know someone, even an aside, that is involved in some way. So educate yourself on that. And educate yourself. Ken mentioned this as well. It's a part of our paper this week on page number 14. It's a history of the now defunct Neepawa Lions Club. In a previous edition of Banner Press, we reported they had to shut down, unfortunately, but they gave us a retrospective of some of the things they did for our community, and boy, what a retrospective it is. All right, with only a few minutes left, we got a couple of things we're going to talk about. Some fun features, the White Mud Music Festival. We got pictures from that event, and we also got pictures and a story from Carberry Homecoming. That event took place recently. Check your local listings for NACTV because they were down there on location getting some video from the event. So if you want to see it, if you weren't able to be down there yourself, you can catch some of the flavor of it, as it were, on an upcoming edition. Check your local listings right here on NACTV for that. So it is that time of year, Ken, where these events are starting to wind down a little bit, but it's still nice to see that they're so well attended and so beloved in their communities.
Well, I think it's second year for the Arden Music Festival, and it's
White Mud, yeah.
White Mud, sorry, held in Arden.
Yeah.
Beautiful setting there in the bowl, so to speak, down by the river, and it was well attended. I had firsthand reports on that from some different people, and it was good. And the Carberry Homecoming looked like it was an excellent event as well. So lots of good stuff to do. I guess we got to get back to school and get back to work soon. Can't be playing anymore.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, well, there's so much more we could talk to you about, but there's only so much time in the day. Like the Farmer's Advocate, we've got 2 pages on that in this week's edition of the newspaper. We've got another full page. Last week, I put out a call to action for people who were involved or new people who were involved in the Manitoba Summer Games in Dauphin to send pictures and information on some of the locals that were involved. We had it in last week's edition. We got as many as we could in the timeline we had, and you came through. There were several more pictures that came through and several more bits of information. Very appreciative of that, to be able to share that information with you in the paper. And actually, we're going to have 1 or 2 more pictures in next week's, and then we'll sort of start focusing in on other events going on. But thank you very much. I asked for some support on this, and you came through in a big way. So thank you. There's so many other things we could talk about as well, but that's why you always got to pick up an actual copy of the Banner Press and see it for yourself. Like I said, it's about 30 different locations throughout Western Manitoba where you're going to be able to pick up a copy, or on mywestman.ca. We got so many other things we could talk about. Ken, before we go, is there anything else you want to sort of put the spotlight on that maybe I didn't do there in the next minute or so we got left?
Well, you did a good job, Owen, as always, and I appreciate it. Yeah, there's just so much going on in the area, and I guess I'm harking back to something you just said. If you have news or pictures, stories that you want in, please submit them. We may or may not have room for them because we're limited to how many pages we can print by how many ads we've got. But we'd love to see articles submitted because we don't have as many staff quite as we used to have. Owen knows that all too well because he has to do more work than he wants to do. So,
despite the fact that I act like a machine, I'm not a machine.
Not a machine.
No.
Anyway, so yeah, send us your stuff.
Yeah. And thank you as always for being supportive not just of the Banner Press, but of NACTV through watching this show or the other shows that are on here. So if you always have any suggestions or ideas for us, always remember, you can get in touch with us either by phone call over at 476-3401, the number we can be reached at, 476-3401, or by email at news@neepawabanner.com. Once again, news@neepawabanner.com. So for Ken, I'm Owen. Thank you as always. Always appreciative of your time and support. And we'll see you next time around on The Story Behind the Stories.